All right, we're back on the 72 Cheyenne. We're back working on the HVA system. We're looking today at the vac controls, what makes them work, what's wrong, and how to fix them. Y'all come along. All right, we're going to take a look at the vacuum system on the 1972 Chevy Cheyenne AC system. If that stuff's not up to par, none of the dash controls and none of this duct work that I've done will mean anything. If you can't get the air to come out of the right vent that you want it to come out of, having good duct work and vent work doesn't matter. So we're going to start at the very beginning of the system, which is the vacuum line comes from the motor over to a vacuum pod. I have a hand operated vacuum pump. You have a line coming off of it, a reducer fitting to fit the vacuum line. And there's a couple different ways you can check this vacuum pod. First thing you can do is you can go on the main source vacuum line, push on, connect to it, and put your thumb over the small vacuum pod line and start drawing vacuum. You can see the gauge going up. And then when you take your thumb off, you should be able to hear it release. Now, you can also take your vacuum line and attach to the smaller line and draw a vacuum and leave that big one, leave the big line uncovered. And the vacuum pump, I want to pump it up, should go ahead and pump up and hold. And it does. You can see the vacuum is holding. On this big line, there is a check valve in there. It's supposed to help this vacuum system maintain vacuum. And then when you pull it off, you can hear it release. So our vacuum ball is good. I'm not real happy with the way they mounted it, but we're going to work on doing something about that. I checked the main vacuum line where it went into the cab of the vehicle, and it is, to say the least, tender. Probably going to have to replace at least that one line. It's seen better days. Now, these also have a vacuum controlled heater valve. So let's take a look at that. All right, with your vacuum controlled heater valve, use the same setup. You got a little a little vacuum line where you can hook onto it. And there's nothing that you can really see, but you can use your ears to hear. From what I read and understand, this vacuum pod leaves the control valve open until it gets vacuum from the engine. So, but we're gonna draw it up. All right, main thing is that on these vacuum pods is that they hold vacuum. Now, I'm gonna release it, and if you listen, maybe you'll be able to hear it. It's kind of hard to pick up on camera audio. You can hear the hiss of the vacuum. I don't know if you can hear the actual diaphragm. Okay, so we've at least determined that the diaphragm is good. I really don't want to get into opening this system up, and if I don't have to, and then because you're having to deal with more lines and connections and fittings and all that other stuff. So we do know that the vacuum holds. We're going to, at this point, assume that the valve is working internally. When we crank it up and we don't have hot water circulating, then we'll look further. But for now, we're going to assume that it's doing what it's supposed to do. All right, now we've got a vent control actuator on the firewall, and we're going to get set up and look at that and show you what's going on with that. All right, we've got a control pod back here. There's a pin that goes through right here, missing. The bracket has been mangled and bent, don't know why, and it is not solidly mounted. Okay, So we're gonna figure all that stuff out, but same process. Whoop, there on my vacuum line. Hook your vacuum line up to the pod, draw vacuum, and see that it actuates. Okay, it does actuate. It is holding vacuum. And if you watch the pod, you can see that it's doing what it's supposed to do. So the vacuum pod itself is good, but we've got to figure out what all this is, how it actually mounts. It's missing a screw, so I love figuring out other people's manglings. All right, we're gonna see if we can, how hard it's gonna be to get this off the firewall here. If I've got the right socket, and I do. Blind pig will find an acorn every once in a while. I'm feeling that screw's stripped out. And that just pulls off. Okay. That's not good. Changing gears. I'm going to take this off the firewall. I'm going to drop it first, lose the screw. Perfect. That's broke. All right, well, after doing a little looking at that pod, the vacuum pod that controls the fresh air or recirculated air vent, it's broken. We've got to take this cowl panel off. So we'll set up a time lapse and get her done. All right, well, I thought what we would do here is make a couple of mental notes for anybody who's following along. May never have done this before, but the vent cowl had to come off, and you need to look right here. Under each side, there's a shim. It's a body shim. That's so that cowl panel will line up properly when the hood is closed, okay? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna put the bolt back in and snug it down on top of that shim so we don't have to guess where it is later. All right, now let's go over to the other side and I'll show you why we had to take this apart. And you can see there's a bolt on this side. And of course it doesn't want to ratchet. All right, now we don't have to guess where that stuff is later. But let's get up here where you can see. See all those leaves? All right, they are blocking part of the vent control, the fresh air vent, which is right there. and part of it is broken off. So we're gonna have to look and see if we can even get this flapper and be able to replace it. There's the piece that's broke off. It's a steel rod set into plastic, or I don't even know, that might even be steel, that may be all plastic, or it may be pot metal. I don't know, I hadn't looked at it that close. But regardless, it's broke off and I don't know of any good way to fix it. So next thing on the map, let's vacuum the stuff out of here. All right, where we left off last is we were vacuuming the rain tray and vent cowl area on the 072, and we were trying to get to this, and you probably saw me at the end of the time lapse dinking around with it there and trying to figure out how that goes back on it, and I don't think there's going to be much of a way to repair it. It appears to be a pot metal piece, and this is what controls the fresh air as opposed to the recirculating air coming into the truck. You've got a that flapper closes off this area right in here. It just folds up and blocks it off, and there's a inside running down this part of the cab. There's a channel built into the cab of the truck, and leads to right there. So if the if the truck is set to recirculate, this flap right there will open and will draw air into the system. And if it's set to fresh air, this flap closes, that flap outside will open and allow fresh air to be drawn into the air conditioning system. So as it sits right now, that flap is constantly open, so it's constantly drawing in fresh air, and you can't ever get it to go to recirculate. So we're going to look into what it's going to take to get another flap to fix that, and we'll have to look up Brothers Truck and see what they got to offer us. All right, like any restoration project, we take a couple steps forward, we take one back. That's okay. We're figuring out what's wrong and how to fix it. Thanks for coming along with me today. And if you hadn't already done it, go down there and hit the subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up, hit the thumbs down. Only thing I ask, if you give me a thumbs down, try to leave me a comment. Tell me why you didn't like what I did. It's the only way I can improve. Now, if you'd like to know more of what goes on in a real world garage, click on the video coming on the screen right now.